that afterwards. So now it gives me great pleasure to get the lecture underway tonight and introduce our chair for the evening, who is Professor Sandy Black. Sandy is a professor of fashion, textile design and technology at the Centre for Sustainable Fashion at the University of the Arts London. Sandy researches, writes and lectures on the intersection of fashion and textile design with emerging technology and science in the context of sustainability for both academic and general audiences, regularly speaking at international conferences and events and contributing articles and chapters to many publications. She is a co-editor of Fashion Practice, Design, Creative Process and the Fashion Industry, and she has also written a number of books, including Eco-Chic, The Fashion Paradox, and Knitwear in Fashion. And she's recently published 2 books, one called The Sustainable Fashion Handbook, and the second one is Knitting a Fashion Industry Craft, which was published by V&A. So please join me in welcoming Professor Sandy Black, who will chair the lecture tonight. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that amazing introduction. I'm really delighted to be here tonight at the Society of Chemistry. Really interesting connections, I think. And I'm really excited also about the topic of tonight's event. So, to introduce the lecture and the session by our architect, Julian Hakes, who, and I understand that this is his first presentation that really looks into the development of the wonderful artifact that he's going to show us, which is called the Mojito. I really am interested in finding out more about how that's developed. As someone who myself has crossed over from studying maths into becoming a knitwear and fashion designer and researcher, I'm really intrigued in hearing how Julian's journey has taken him from architecture, which he trained in, and also some environmental training. He has an MPhil, which then created that transition to where he's working today. So from architecture to becoming a really rather amazing fashion footwear innovator and entrepreneur, and someone who's shown his work on the catwalk at London Fashion Week for 4 seasons, and also was one of the first to show sort of rapid manufacturing, rapid prototyping in that context. So I won't actually take the thunder away from his lecture, and I'll just say that I'm sure you'll be as fascinated as I am to hear how he got from A to Z, or A to B with Z in between. So I'm very much like you to welcome Julian to the podium and look forward to the fascinating talk that I know he's going to give us. And also it's very visual. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Can everybody hear me all right? Okay. So I'm going to start with a little bit of background as myself as an architect, and just take you through some of the projects that we've done over the last few years, and I think that will really help you understand the transition that we made into fashion footwear. So we ran the practice here in London for 10 years, and ran the practice with my wife, Carrie Jane, and we met working some years before that for Michael Hopkins here in London. And then we went off to finish our architectural training up at Cambridge, and where we studied together. And we set up our first office when we were 24 in a spare student room at university. And we've worked together ever since. This is some pictures of a project that you might recognise from Grand Designs. It's Visitor Centre in Lancashire, and it was an RABA award-winning project, and something that is really important in the way that we work with old buildings. So this is some of the way that we kind of kept something with a lot of history and played something really modern off in that context. And it's used as a theatre, it's an exhibition space, and it sits on the Bronte Trail in Wycolla. when we finished that building, I remember one of the local guys coming in and saying, looks like a spaceship. And to him, it was a bit disturbing that it was so out of context, but to try and reinvigorate buildings in a rural context, it needed to be special. And the younger generation who it was kind of designed for absolutely loved it, and have used it for plays and things like that. So here's a long view. So we didn't touch any of the building at all. Everything we put in there was totally independent from the main structure. We've done landscape projects. This is a little view of a competition we did down in the city where the Richard Rogers so-called cheese grater project was going in. And we designed a park that was in the hole in the ground. So this is a kind of recession project. So when the building had been on hold, there was this vacant site. So we were invited to compete for this idea for this sunken garden. So our concept was to mirror all of the internal walls of this space and then plant it with a grove of trees. So it felt like an infinite forest. This is a project, if you've been up to Liverpool, you might have seen that we did for Liverpool City of Culture. It was Europe's largest digital media screen, and that is not a rendering, that's the real quality picture on Europe's biggest digital media screen. And it was hiding a car park and a building site while the building was getting renovated. And this is how it looks across the site. I think they launched things like Batman and things like that on that screen. This is a little project looking, this is actually in a project for King's Cross. This was a competition to design something within the old gas holders on the site. And we were looking to find ways to blend the technology of materials through the form and the way it's designed. And to do something like this as an object could be quite expensive. So we found out that by using flat sheets of rolled steel that were pre-finished in a stainless finish, it was much more efficient than actually forming them. So it's like an orange that's been peeled. So this is kind of maths and architecture. And this is some of the close-ups of the model. So that large sphere sits inside the gas holder, reflects the outside of the gas holder, but then at times disappears, at times it's quite bold. And inside it had a big concert, like a geodesic concert venue inside. This was some work where we crossed over into retail. And at the time of doing this type of design, we didn't know that in a few years from now, we would have been creating something that was going to be retail. So we were learning that side of things, doing the design for brands and for the entrances to shopping centres, etc., and interiors, but had no idea it would come back round circle. This is a chapel we designed that we gained planning for in Northwood, and that is the shape of the cross here is only the reflection coming through that vertical light, so it's reflecting off the ceiling. So it was a space within a theological college, so you could close that window and it could be more of a neutral space, or in this setting, you could get the sense of the cross within the space. And then this is the kind of crossover between bridge work and building. So this is something we gained planning for in Paddington Basin on the Merchant Square site. This was a harbour master's building with a bridge link built into it. And one of the things that, when we set up our architectural company, we were fortunate to have been doing some competition work for the company that was then Whitley Bird. And when we set up the office, we were given some space in that engineering firm to set up our practice. So we had a lot of experience of engineers around us. So we developed quite a taste for bridges. And this is one of the first bridges that we designed with a company called Burrow-Happold, and this is in Boston, Massachusetts. And you can see the two dotted lines. We didn't do the Big Dig Bridge on the right-hand side. That's something a little bit different. But there was so much infrastructure in this site that the rivers were blocked and you couldn't move along the banks. So we had to design something that stitched its way through. So we were trying to find something that could go up over things and down under things. So it was a very visual way, just like a gymnast on parallel bars or rings. At times when the structure had to dip down, it went underneath and went low like a sine curve, and when it had to go over the rail tracks, it went high. And this was the kind of resultant cross-section. And that relationship, for me, between site and place and the way you design something is crucial. This is probably one aesthetically which links most directly to the work I'm about to show you, which is Mobius Bridge in Bristol. This again was a competition that was organised through the RABA and the client at Finzel's Reach, and we won the competition, gained planning for the project, and it's now in development. And I forgot to say that the bridge in Boston is now built and finished. So we designed that 2001 with Borough Happold, and it's just been completed this year. So that shows you how long these projects take. This was 2002, the Mobius Bridge. So a structure about maths and shape and form and the capabilities of what we could design in the computer and what we could in CAD and how we could create it. So this is a single-sided, single-surface shape that was twisted in the middle, so it has a pedestrian bridge running right across the middle, and it's an S shape because you can't get the disabled ramp in from one side to the other in a straight line, so you have to take that route and compress it. You can't have any loads thrusting into the banks because it's full of archaeology, so the bridge had to sit in the river. And to me, it became, and the team as we were doing it, became obvious that we had to kind of link these two things back together. So that's when it became this point. And there was a point when the ribbon was joining the structure coming up from the foundation, and it was so close to being a full Mobius, it just joined in the right way. So we've then worked internationally as well in Los Angeles on some concepts for some bridges in the Great Park in Orange County. This was looking at using timber. It's like a lattice work structure, and this was the precursor to something coming in a moment. We're looking at common points that could join together with a node, so to make something very organic and quite exciting as a surface, but very simple and easy to make, and that link between something beautiful and how you make it is really important. This is Liverpool Cathedral. This is another competition we did for a bridge which has a spiral like a Fibonacci series down the middle, and this had a kind of poetic reason. It was a link between the church and the city, so we wanted that link between maths and a shape and a surface which you find in maths, but you also find in nature, and that I was enjoying that kind of the duality between that. Biggest bridge we've worked on is in Moscow. This is a project that we again won in an international competition, and spans the Moscow River, and it's a 6-lane highway bridge. And this has a curve created by the cables, but the cables are all dead straight. So it's a blend between a cable stay bridge and a catenary bridge. So it's a hyperbolic paraboloid as a surface, which you'll then see, I believe, in some of these next structures. This is in Colchester. This is a bridge made out of timber. And what you're seeing here is almost the bending moment and the forces in the bridge expressed as a structure. And this is a close-up of a model we did, which is, in architecture and engineering, we've been using 3D printing and rapid prototyping for many years. And it's something that, it's the only way to, when you're doing surfaces and structures like this in the computer, to try and communicate them. Because you can then take these surfaces and build them for real, but it's much quicker and easier to see the concept when you rapid prototype that. Sometimes described as 3D printing. And if you can imagine a photocopier that prints all night long, and every time it prints, it moves up just a fraction. So it's like putting layers of paper on top of itself overnight. In the morning, you have a physical object. So you start from either powder or liquid resin. So these are those shapes. And this is Eelnet Bridge in London, which also has planning now. And this is in Southall. And actually, this was a point where the computer couldn't actually create the surfaces we wanted it to, so we're limited to an approximation of a grid. But the actual model that we made could be made as dead straights. So you see here that even though it's all curvy in elevation, all those long members are dead straights. And the only way to produce that was by working in a piece of software that you use for building airplanes. So we're using kind of aeronautical technology to build bridges. So how do you go from doing bridges and architectures into designing footwear? And I think it's an interesting question. But I think that as trained in the way we are as architects and designers, we're always inquisitive to kind of challenging things, never really accepting the way that it's described to us as the only way it can be. And I had been thinking for a while that I kind of had a strong feeling that shoes looked the way they did just because of not a laziness as such, but a kind of lack of re-examination of what the shoe is and what the foot is and how it works. And I wondered if it was just a tradition that had stopped evolving, so therefore it was no longer a tradition, it was just a replication of something from before. So I was thinking about the footprint in the sand and the way that kind of, to me, represents how the body is loaded and how the depth of the print shows how you walk. And then I was thinking then also, but if you have a foot that has a heel on it, what would that footprint look like? It would just be the ball of the foot with the toes. So, with a kind of engineering head on, trying to work out where the force goes through the foot and where that transfers to the ground. Now, this is quite an extreme high foot position, but you can see that down the front of the foot through the bones, the metatarsal bone, straight to the ball of the foot, you have this load path. And then you have a separate kind of load path out the back of the heel, which you could kind of draw as a kind of diagonal line, which then has a vertical component. And I had looked at some shoes and bought them, and then pulled them apart, and then discovered that they're made of bits of plastic, bits of cardboard, bits of leather, a big bit of metal, all these materials. And it seemed a very inelegant and messy construction. So I started sketching this concept about a way of wrapping the foot and trying to think how I could have a shoe or a foot that didn't need that middle bit. Because I knew we had to protect the front, I knew we had to somehow support and protect the back. And I got some blocks of wood, put them on the floor in the studio, stood on them and felt, well, my foot kind of works. I could understand myself where the load of my body was going. And also notice that the toes in your foot will slightly spread a little bit when you load them. So that was the starting point. The foot was the brief and the way the foot could move. So at that point I stopped sketching and started making, and this is the first time you'll see a mojito in a shot. Quite a dangerous photograph at 9:30 in the evening with a half-finished glass of mojito, a scalpel, and my foot in paper. So this was, I'm not trained as a footwear designer. I just took my shoe off and wrapped my foot in drawing paper and masking tape and started drawing the shapes around my foot. And that was really the beginning of that process. And yes, 2 mojitos later, this is where I got to. So we'd finished this initial idea, and it's 10:40 at night down here now. So, an hour and a half later. So this was back in 2006. And I didn't think too much of it. I'd done it, but I knew there was something special here. There's something different. I didn't quite know how to describe it. Didn't quite know what to do with it or where to take it. And so I did some sketches. I locked them in the safe in the office and then just left them. And then it was I don't know when it was, probably 2 years later. I kind of thought I should do something with that. And I was designing a couple of other things. One was a surfboard with 2 noses that didn't work. It turned too quickly. Something else was in kiteboarding, and then I thought I should do this shoe again. And I was just experimenting with these projects, and so I thought, okay, fine. So I'll do some more development on this. So we took the paper versions and we worked it up in 3D CAD, and we tried to measure it physically, and we made a 3D model, this is what it looked like. So the concept here was like a carbon fiber core with rubber on the outside that touched the ground and leather on the inside. So you can almost see the Mobius bridge here in the shoe, but it's not a link, it's not a Mobius, it's a single ribbon. And here I brought along, this is like the magician bit. So this is the actual original. So this is the 3D print that was used to make that graphic. So the same data was used to make this, and so we made these graphics, and we thought it looked quite interesting the way it could work, and we had no real appreciation of how it was all going to work. So we then went out and we went and bought a wooden footlast down in Soho, and we just could not get any of these anywhere in the UK. And then it turns out now, if you go into Selfridge's shoe galleries, you'll see nearly every one of their tables is made out of recycled shoe lasts. So they were probably buying up the entire UK stock of these things. So so we had this paper version made on my foot, then 3D scanned and printed out in 3D printing, and then this is the foot last, and then you'll see straight away that basically there's no way that's going to go in there as a workable shoe. So we kind of thought, okay, let's just leave it for that. So we left it at that stage, and I'll just put those up there. And then we published it to a website called Zine, and we just thought, well, just send these images off, maybe they'll publish them. And then that same evening, the editor, Marcus Furs, called me and said to put my name into Google, and I didn't really know what he meant, and I didn't understand, and I did, and so all of the work we'd done in architecture and training, all our bridges that we'd won, all our competitions, was all gone. There wasn't a single mention of Julian and Carrie Hakes as architects at all. All it was a picture of this green shoe on nearly every fashion blog and website around the world. So it had gone to America, to a website called Gizmodo, and they had picked it up, and it had something like 100,000 hits in an hour or something ridiculous. And then because it, there was no foot in it, we knew that it wasn't at a point where it was going to work with a foot. So we put it out there, and this is what happened. And then this is a wonderful little screenshot from Gizmodo on one of those days. And so there you have this fantastic graph in the bottom left-hand corner with number of blisters on one axis and the cuteness of the shoe. And then this is another person here, top left, saying, now this is how it should be. But it's not running, it's not a function as such. And then I like this one down here, it's just all a mess. So people were trying to understand this as a shoe, kind of the question, wait, this is a shoe. And so we thought, the traditional process would be, don't tell anyone, keep it totally safe, keep it totally secret. But by revealing this concept in this way, our name, the image, and the iconography of that shoe went out very, very wide. Now, I must say at the same time, we already had applied for our patents and things, so it wasn't totally free for all. But we also knew that by revealing it in this way, it wasn't in a position where it could be just taken and immediately used, because we knew we had a lot more development to do, which we were doing in the background. So, it was a point when, people were trying to understand it. So this is what it did to our Flickr results on that day. So, from a nice kind of steady to, just like what has happened to that site. And then so we put a stop on everything. We said, right, no more press, no more PR, but it was too late. So the power of the web had taken over. And I had a phone call from Forbes, who were releasing edition 1 in Asia of their magazine, and I thought we might get a little picture in it or something. And they ran a 4-page feature on link between architecture and footwear, which was, I actually didn't believe it until I received the hard copy. I thought it was a factory trying to get the ideas off me or something. But so then we said, right, there absolutely must be no more PR. But the blogs were running off with it. So this is someone's a very fine effort to sketch out how the foot works in the shoe. And there were lots of other people trying to sketch their ideas. And there was a really wonderful French student who did his own stop-motion animation of this shoe and tried to make it out of a piece of Coca-Cola can or something. So in the meantime, while all this was going on the web, and we had closed the doors on any press and PR, and only gave out low-resolution graphics, that meant that only blogs could run with it, which I'd learned from my architectural career, that if a supplement Sunday supplement runs with a story, then the other one wouldn't. So I didn't let anybody have it. So then we started testing back in the studio with cardboard versions. Here's the wooden footlast here now with the next edition, which is, I brought the yellow one today. So this is what happens. We went up to Taranti's workshop just off Tottenham Court Road, a sculptor's workshop, which we use for sourcing materials for architectural models. We bought some carbon fibre strips and some resin, bought some gloves, and turned the studio into a shoe design workshop. So this is now showing. So that's the carbon fibre version wrapped around a shoe. I think one of the first things I did with that was try to stand in it, and you can see at the back it's just a flat ribbon. But even that, curing after 3 days, was almost strong enough to take my load. And one of the things that you can kind of learn from, demonstrate, from kind of materials, if things that are quite weak, if they're kind of orientated in the right way, become strong. And I think that's what we were trying to find out, was how can something be light and delicate, but orientate the loads and the forces in the most efficient way. So the studio was full of shoes, and the architectural models went to one side, but we realized that this wasn't going to work. And I think it was at this stage actually, we went to the Royal College of Art. And both Carrie and myself used to, after we graduated, we taught architecture back up at Cambridge, and some of our students went on to the RCA. So we had some links there, and we went to speak to the footwear department, to Sue Saunders, and she was also working with cordwainers. And so she had a look at this, and she put her foot in that, and she goes, yeah, that can work with some development. And she said she loves it when people come to footwear designed from different backgrounds. So we soon learned that this is designed for soft materials and leathers wrapping around surfaces, and not necessarily for a structural shoe like this. So we then took our foot model and we did this to her. So we then put her both feet into a bucket. We bought some fairly cheap heels, took all the tops off, and she stood in the bucket with her heel, and then we cast her feet in plaster, and then we took that back to the Royal College of Art and 3D laser scanned it to take it into this form here, so I can't remember which of her feet this one is. But even the little bubbles in the surface come out when you 3D laser scan. And then we were able to then work back over the top of this in 3D to give us a more refined version. Now, this was the next version we had here, and it's still quite thin. Its curves are getting a bit more resolved, but we're starting to now bring in some elements of flex into the front of it and understanding where the foot works and where the pivot point is. So we started to get a sense this could be quite strong. It's quite a thin ribbon, and so these are some of the views. And you can see the contact points are not all correct. It was still early days. These are some of the views from the back. The problem with some of these surfaces is a solid object's quite easy to laser scan, but trying to re-laser scan this is difficult because there's so many undercuts. So this was the process we had got to there. And then round about this point, we were approached by the potential of some investment. And that investment was really significant because it was linked to a manufacturer base with a fantastic distribution chain. So we knew that this was a great opportunity for us. And the kind of challenge laid down was, they said to us, this is really interesting. If you can get it to a point where it's wearable, walkable, usable, then we'll talk again. So we basically continued to develop it, and round about that time we were approached by a Swedish designer called Ann-Sophie Back, and she asked if we would do a collection of shoes for her for the catwalk at London Fashion Week. So we were right in the middle of this stage of development, and we said, right, well, we're going to have to do this. And we were also fortunate to be invited by Ada Zanderton as well, a London designer, to do a collection with her. So we thought, right, how on earth do we make this? So kind of jumped ahead a little bit here, because this is actually the original shoes that were catwalked at London Fashion Week. So this is a 3D printed frame. It was the only way we could manufacture it through that process. And here's one of them coming out of the moulding process here, just covered in dust. So this is one of those boxes of resin, just of powder, just like flour in a basin. And the laser scans it all night long, and this is what you get in the morning. So this is the shape, and you can see the shapes on the side of here coming straight from that piece. And it's only now that we had realized that, because I'd used it in architecture and engineering for a number of years, and I thought, well, how to make that shape? We 3D print it. We pretty sure we were probably the first person in the people in the world to 3D print and successfully catwalk a shoe like this. We didn't know at the time. It was just the only way we had available and to do it. So that's without the dust and the top surface blown off. And there's that would be a dangerous drink. There's a bucket of mojitos. So this is a little video showing some of the walk tests in the studio. So let's see if I can just go back to that again. On her right foot is a regular shoe, and the left foot is this shoe. And just seeing it's kind of working, just a normal shoe, just with a gap in the middle. And so we thought, well, let's go for it. Let's do this. So we made a whole load of shoes in the studio, and there's kind of fueled by Red Bull and spray mount and everything else that's in there. And it's a process that we 3D printed the frame. The rubber sole was made by the cobblers on Tower Bridge Road, the gents' shoe shop. The leather was stitched by the dry cleaners on Tower Bridge Road as well. So we just, all the resources we had. So when I walked into the cobblers with this thing, I think that's probably what he said he thought it was, but it's something he'd never seen before, and he was quite amused by it. But, and this is so then we had this one chromed, a spray chrome finish, and this is some of the collection that we used for Fashion Week. And so this is my backstage kit. There's car polish, scissors, and hacksaws, jewellery saws, sanding blocks, Dremels. So not your normal backstage kit for a fashion person, but that's what we had to have. So, you know, we had one model that her foot was slightly longer on one foot than the other, so we tried to trim the heel off, and it was all very, it was a very stressful environment, but nothing broke. These are some of the shots from some of those catwalk events. No one fell over. This is me making some modifications, and it was really nerve-wracking because, you know, we tested them, we looked at them, we weren't sure what people's reactions were going to be. We didn't know how the model's going to enjoy them. And then we discovered that the models obviously often get changed at the very last minute, so the ones that you've tested them on aren't the ones that turn up because they're late back from Milan or missed the flight, or, you know, these things happen. So this is some of the chrome ones with Anne-Sophie's collection, and the black ones here. And it was really great watching. I mean, it was a great blend, this collection that Anne-Sophie did, because she did a really minimal collection. And I was fortunate to work with her on these glasses as well, and some other accessories. I love this shot with this guy at the front, just kind of looking at the shoes. It's like where they're trying to work out how they work. So after that, then we were, you know, inundated with requests, but we only had maybe 15, 16 pairs of these shoes available. So they were used by Miles Aldridge for a shoot here for Vogue, which I love the combination of the stripes and the shoe. And I've just actually sliced off my shoe at this end a little bit, just to move it down the frame a little bit. But that is the shoe made by made by 3D print, and the cobbler and the dry cleaners on Towerbridge Road and ourselves. And then this is in Wall Street Journal as well. And then we were met with the investment, and which was brilliant. So we had to go from a process of it being almost ready to being much more developed. So we went through maybe 100 and plus 3D print versions, and we had to come up with our own language of, I'll leave these for you to look at later, language of how we communicated to both our design team but also the manufacturers how to modify the shape. And this is very, very thin section, and this is a liquid version rather than this is a nylon version. So this is a lot more brittle as a piece, so we couldn't have used that for catwalk piece, but the resolution is much higher, so you can get a much better finish. And here where I've marked it red is for taking away millimeters, pluses are adding material, dots are for refining edges. And it was a process of digital, 3D print, and then card body filler back over the top, sanding, modifying the shape, test fitting it on the foot model, back into 3D scan, back into 3D print again. So that's the circular process we went through. So we had this opportunity of developing a much more refined product with a showroom in New York, distribution in Asia, and also in Europe, and the head office is currently based in Munich, and we have showrooms here in London as well. And then we had to start thinking about things like points of sale, which we had designed as architects from the other side, but never for our own product. Trying to find that blend here of something more modern with something more classic, and a kind of British message in terms of how it's being executed. And all the time, the shoes are being tested and tried and modified. And we also had to think about packaging. So, you know, how do you package something so unique? So we tried to find a way to think of a concept that we said was well-heeled. Now, it doesn't mean shoes, it means weaponry. So that would be we were looking at things like dueling swords and pistols in boxes and that type of thing. And so the way that a pistol are kind of linked in with each other, like this type of position. And we wanted that moment when you open this box to be really special and really unique. And so this is what we did, and we laid them in a kind of really nice foam, like a kind of camera case or a piece of art or a sculpture. So that's how they come. So when they come, they're kind of in this kind of mix, and you can't quite tell what they are until you take them out of the box. And then we then had to do the it's the process of going through the kind of international fashion conferences, and we were invited to Premier Class in Paris, which is a great honour. And then we've now shown in places, including Las Vegas, at the big trade shows there, and all throughout Europe. So at the medium stage, this is how the kind of shoe was looking. This is our foot model in one of the 3D printed versions. So she's standing up on the desk there so we can look in detail. And so working with this process was fundamental. So every little millimeter change we tested back on the rail foot and back into digital again, and that was just the only way we could actually do this process. So the shoe then is something which is available in lots of different colours, lots of different ways, and people have really enjoyed the way that it's done. These are some of the new shoes that are coming into store now. So it's available in the UK, it's been sold in Korea and Japan, just launching in America now. We had a launch in Shanghai not so long ago, and Hong Kong. And you can see here, actually now we have like a molded 3D padding as well. So it's evolved again. This is probably like version 3. And we can then start to play with different finishes and different materials on the shoe. And there's a whole load of really exciting stuff we've been doing with it. But it totally changes its nature. And one of the things that I've really enjoyed about this process is watching different people from different backgrounds and different ages picking up the shoes in different ways. So sometimes they go for the black one if they're looking for a more sophisticated, elegant look, or something more party. They go for something like this, or something like this one. That would have been great for the Vogue shot earlier, but maybe a bit too much zebra. But the finishes and the colours are something which we can change quite easily. And I think the thing for me is I was trying to create something that could, a process that I was trying to call democratic couture, if that makes sense. It's something where, as an architect, when you design something, good design should not necessarily cost more. It can often be better value, it can be faster, it can be more economical, more sustainable. And so I wanted to demonstrate a product that could be designed and manufactured and packaged in a way that was smaller, tighter, lighter. But in some ways, you could say that the 3D print revolution allows products like this to become like iTunes for your feet in many ways. It will happen shortly where this digital data will become available and you can print the shoe at home. It's not quite there yet. It's close to it. So the process we're using is slightly different. But that basically means that you would then produce locally to where you sell. And that means that instead of packaging and sending boxes of air halfway around the world, you just email the digital files and then they're recreated at source. And I think that was a really important thing for us to do, because this is now through an inject process, and we only use the material we need to stand up in, basically. So there's no waste, there's nothing cut off, there's nothing thrown away. We're not relying on huge amounts of hand labour to produce it, which makes it quite economical to produce it. It then means that the price point in the market is really good. And that, to me, was really key. I didn't want something that was going to be unobtainable. It was going to be something designed well that, if you liked it, you could enjoy it. This was something that came out of London Fashion Week. This is a unique pair of shoes that we did for the launch of the Iron Man 3 movie for Disney Marvel. So this is, the brief given to me was, if Tony Stark, who's the Iron Man character, designed a pair of shoes for Pepper Potts, played by Gwyneth Paltrow, how would they look? And we said, well, probably he would 3D print it. He'd probably scan her foot and do it like digital Cinderella. And so we did a shoe for the launch, and Marvel gave us the chance to do this with them as a collaboration, which is great. And we put a little LED in the back of the heel, a bit like the kind of Iron Man's arc reactor in his chest, and used the kind of hot rod red. So it's really versatile, and it has become a fantastic canvas for collaboration as well. So there's some other really great stuff in the pipeline that I can't show you just yet, but this is some little snapshots from some of the lookbook bits we did. And you see the two shoes together over the head make like a little love heart shape. So we just recently reworked the box and the packaging so that is how the shoes look when you open the box. So you're presenting with this kind of love heart shape, and people really like that. And this is some of the this is actually December, so our poor models did a fantastic job. It was absolutely freezing, and you wouldn't know. So, but there's the Aspeterfields and St. Paul. So, and it's wonderful. They create a rail stir, and on this shoe, actually, someone walked past and said, "Are those the Julian Hakes Mojito shoes?" So people had seen them. They weren't even in the shops at this point, so they were kind of aware of it within the press and within the blogs. And then Within the last year, we've done a series of further collaborations and catwalks. What's quite interesting here is that the way the shoe is, it's almost like an object, like a product in itself, like a hat, like a bracelet, like a bag. It's worn as a different type of accessory, I think, and that's quite nice with the match of the colours from the bag and the hat. And this is a catwalk collection we did with Hilary Alexander, which was really great to work with her. And this was just this last year, just before Christmas. And we've also had the pleasure to work with Zandra Rhodes on some of her catwalk stuff as well, which is a fantastic character. This was the launch in Hong Kong, this one. So these are some happy customers with several bags of our shoes. So people would love the colours so much. I mean, there are currently 30 colours available. So people just wouldn't they'd take an evening pair and then they take a party pair. So, and again, this product probably, as a design, probably wouldn't have existed without the internet. And this is just last week on the Larry King show with Kat Von D, who, off her own back went and bought a pair of these fabulous shoes, and then she wore them on every one of her book tour signings over the last few weeks in America. So she's a big fan, and that kind of role of the internet in terms of spreading a message is just fundamental these days. So that's where we'll just leave you there, and I'm just going to finish with a short video of that lookbook shoot, which I'll just run here, which should just be underneath here. And if we go to here, let's have a look. Right. Is there a sound on there? There we go. There we go. Okay, and then just as we close here, the last stages, I brought along actually the Iron Man shoes were given away for a competition, so the only other one that exists in the world is this one, which is the initial prototype, and then the final 3D print before manufacture. So that's so please, you're welcome to have a look at these. This is just a bit delicate, that one. That's the only thing tonight, but thank you very much.
Well, I think